Hey everyone, some Monday morning Browns thoughts for you here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. I needed to kind of evaluate some things. Also, seeing how things transpired in the rest of the NFL, the Browns, despite losing 24-6 to the Cincinnati Bengals, and we'll get to that element of this discussion here about the Cleveland Browns. It actually was a good day for the Cleveland Browns because the Carolina Panthers won in overtime. That's another team. I almost called them the Oakland Raiders. They're the Las Vegas Raiders. Sorry, I know a lot of people probably still wish they were in Oakland, but the Las Vegas Raiders, they won for the first time, ironically, since they beat the Cleveland Browns in Vegas when Deshaun Watson was the quarterback. That feels like an eternity ago. So the Raiders win. The Browns, depending on where you look, and I don't really know the way to determine this because some of these sites that determine draft order are not accurate. Some people have the Browns as the fourth pick right now with 2 weeks to go. Some people have the Browns as the fifth pick with 2 weeks to go. So the Cleveland Browns, I think we're at like 7 or 8 before this week. So they got some breaks this week. And it leads me into my next point. So the Browns were not good in this game. I love Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I may have said it on this channel. I got to cover this young man when he was at UCLA. This guy is as tough and determined, hard-nosed for a lighter kid. He plays with so much heart. He just took a beating at UCLA, came back for multiple years, and just had so much heart. He was everything that was right with college football. He would make mistakes, but he would go out there and just give it his all, no matter what the circumstance was at UCLA. So when he got drafted by the Browns, I was really excited because I was like, hey, maybe we could see if he could turn into a developmental prospect. God bless him. I think this guy's a wonderful young man, but I don't think he's a starting NFL quarterback. It's just not happening. He had 157 yards on 34 attempts in this game. And he threw 2 interceptions. Both of them were backbreaking. The Browns had a chance to really get back into this game. There were a lot of other things that didn't work out. They had a fumble after a 66-yard run to start this thing that was not ideal. I mean, the Browns only had 273 yards of total offense in this game, and 66 of them came on the first play of the game from Jerome Ford, and then they fumbled on the 1-yard line. And then like I said, DTR just threw a bunch of it, threw some really crippling interceptions. There was one on a blitz where he just threw it up for grabs and it got intercepted. He made an amazing play on a 4th down to David Njoku. But what Browns fans are seeing from DTR is what I've seen. And, I wanted to believe that this guy is a 5th-round guy a couple years ago, was going to turn into maybe a developmental prospect. But obviously, we didn't want to get to the situation here in year 1 and year 2 where he's starting because it's Deshaun Watson's been hurt and has been terrible. That's the reality of why we're where we are at. But the reason why I let off talking about the draft pick situation is why was Dorian Thompson-Robinson out there when Jameis Winston was on a historic run with this offense in terms of gaining yardage? Yes, he was turning the ball over, but the Browns were moving the ball. Jerry Jeudy was one of the 5 best receivers in the NFL the last 6 weeks with Jameis Winston at quarterback. And they benched him because, they had a bad game against Kansas City. But here's what happened. The Cleveland Browns are looking around and saying, we're 3-11 going into this game against Cincinnati. Jameis is turning over the ball. We have nothing to play for. So let's throw a dart at the dartboard with DTR and see what he's got. We probably don't think he's going to be the starter next year, but let's see if he can, maybe play himself into something and potentially be the guy. The odds are we're heavily leaning in the favor of he wasn't going to work. And if that happens, that's not the end of the world because the Browns at this point are not trying to win. They are trying to get the best draft pick possible. As stupid as that sounds, that's been the story of this franchise really for the last 25 years. With a handful of seasons where they've been good, this team has been largely terrible. And they need a lot of help. But that doesn't dismiss the fact that this season has been incredibly disappointing. And this team has a chance to finish with at maximum 5 wins. And they've got Baltimore at the end of the season. And the odds are that's not going to be a win. because Baltimore is probably going to have to play everybody to win that game in order to get the division and get a home playoff game in the first round, because they're not going to get a bye. But Miami at home next week. By the way, this is another thing that is a reflection of how terrible this season went for the Cleveland Browns. They've been flexed out of primetime games in back-to-back weeks. This Miami game was supposed to be a Sunday night football game, flexed out because the Browns are terrible. The Cincinnati game that was happened this week, that was supposed to be on Thursday night. It got flexed out to Sunday. So that's another reflection of why this, this whole thing, this whole season has just been a disaster. But for those who are wondering why in the hell the Browns would throw Dorian Thompson-Robinson out there when Jameis Winston was moving the ball better, is like, okay, there's nothing to play for this season anymore. The Browns aren't going to the playoffs. They showed signs of life, but it didn't mean anything. So it's like, hey, you've got a young quarterback on your roster. You've got to figure out what you're doing next year, even though if the people in the organization are trying to convince us that Deshaun Watson's going to have a chance. He's not. He's not going to be the quarterback next year. Like, the Browns have seen what's happened with Bo Nix with the Denver Broncos. They cut bait after 2 years on Russell Wilson and are eating like $80 million in dead cap money. The Broncos are. The Browns are going to have to eat a lot more because they deferred a lot of it. And who knows, maybe they'll just keep Deshaun. But there's no way after seeing the first 7 games of this season that you could, honest to God, convince yourselves that Deshaun Watson is the best option at quarterback. Whether they're able to get a quarterback in this draft, whether it's Cam Ward or whether they go offensive line or they have an opportunity to potentially get a Travis Hunter who's probably the best player in this draft, but because of the value of quarterback, Shedeur Sanders is probably going to be the number 1 pick. Cam Ward can maybe have an argument, but Shedeur feels like whether you love him or you hate him or you don't like his attitude or not, he's the most physically gifted passer in this class. So Cam Ward obviously has some more wow plays, but there's a lot of more questions with him because he takes a lot more risks. So we'll see. And then there's some other potential options at quarterback maybe later in this draft that they could take a run at. I know a lot of people aren't going to like the Kirk Cousins option, but that's definitely out there because Atlanta, the Falcons have clearly moved off of him and they're going to cut him. That's what's going to happen. So they could have a situation there, especially if Kevin Stefanski stays, but we'll talk about that in a second. But in regards to this game, the Bengals didn't play that amazing. They had 326 yards total offense. Joe Burrow has been incredible. He threw 3 touchdowns, but yeah, they were up 17-6 in the last 2 minutes of this game. The Browns had a chance. They were in this. They just made back-breaking turnovers. This has been the story of their season. And you could chalk it up to a number of different things: talent deficiencies, just underperforming, bad quarterback play, bad run game. Like the run game's been awful, bad offensive line play, whatever. But it's not working. And like I said, at maximum, they're going to finish with 5 wins. It's either going to be 3, 4, or 5 wins on the season. And if the Browns are really in full tank mode, they will finish 3-14. And that's not a good season. And Browns fans will say, somebody's going to have to take the fall for 3-14. Well, before you say that, the Browns brought back a coach in Hugh Jackson who went 1-31 and went 0-16, and they still brought him back. If you guys are going to convince yourselves that Kevin Stefanski's in any sort of trouble, you don't know this organization, okay? There could be an argument, but like I said, and I've said this with, Ryan Day at Ohio State. Who are you getting that is a better option? And Ohio State is a much more attractive job than the Cleveland Browns. Unless you are going to force out Kevin Stefanski and elevate Mike Vrabel from a consulting stage to the head coach, I don't think there is any realistic option out there that is better than Kevin Stefanski. Has he had a bad year? Absolutely. He has underperformed massively. It doesn't help that the general manager has not done him because the trade really crippled this organization from making any picks, and the picks that Andrew Berry has made have not been good. And then on top of it, the picks that he made that were cut were helping beat him in this game against the Cincinnati. Cade York hits a 60-yard field goal. Where the hell was that? Dustin Hopkins, who was great last year, has been terrible. He missed another extra point. Like, there's a lot of problems and there's a lot of fixing that needs to be done in the offseason. But right now, I think even though this was a loss and this has been a miserable season, this was actually a very good Sunday for the Cleveland Browns because now they are in position to get one of the 4 or 5 best players in this upcoming draft. It may not be a quarterback, and frankly, if it's not a quarterback, I don't really care because once you get past Shador Sanders and Cam Ward, none of these quarterbacks really wow me. And Drew Aller, a guy who I was potentially getting excited about, he's going back to school at Penn State. Arch Manning is going to be available in a couple of years. Like it's not a wow quarterback class. Jalen Milroe, if you want to mold him into something, but that's going to take time. I think the best option is for them to get a bridge guy, a Kirk Cousins. I know that's not going to wow people, but Kirk Cousins had some of his best years with Kevin Stefanski. And if they move forward with them, which I think they will, I think that's the direction that they are going to go in. But all in all, like I said, disappointing loss, but then based off of some of the results that happened throughout the day in the NFL and with 2 weeks to go in the season, the Browns are in a pretty good spot to potentially get a top draft pick, which, they need help. That's been evident since the start of this season. Like, this was not a tanking season. Like, some people were saying, they've been taken since the start of the season. It's like, no. This organization legitimately believed that Deshaun Watson was the answer at quarterback. And that's a whole separate issue. And somebody's going to have to answer for that. I don't think it's going to be the head coach because he's proven it. As I've said on this channel, Andrew Berry's the one that is at risk here. If anybody's getting fired outside of the coaching, like there are some coaches on this staff that are going to be removed. Andy Dickerson, the offensive line coach, is gone. Deuce Staley, the running backs coach, is probably gone. I would probably say that Kent Dorsey should be gone as well. This has not worked. And if they're going to move forward with a different offense, I think Kevin Stefanski needs to put back in his offense. And I think he might need to seize back play calling or at least bring back somebody that aligns with your ability to call plays. Okay. So that's really where I'm at with this whole thing. And we'll see where everything ends up at the end of the season, where they're drafting. But, this organization clearly thought that Deshaun Watson was going to lead them somewhere after that, playoff berth last year, and they lost to the Houston Texans. And, it's really unfortunate to see what this season has become. But if you look at this game, and try to evaluate it from any perspective of, oh yeah, you know what, we should have tried to win. And it's like, because I know Raiders fans are kind of upset that they won. It's like, yeah, you can try to win, but it's like the Browns aren't trying to win. They know they're in the shitter. They know they need help. So on some level, it's about pride. But I think what they were doing with this DTR thing, and it like some people say, Jameis would have won. They're not trying to win. They were trying to see if this guy could potentially be a guy. And if they win, okay, great. But the odds are he wasn't going to be great. And if that's the case, you get this result and it's not the end of the world. Okay. So those are my Browns thoughts here. We'll have some more stuff throughout the week. The Miami game actually could turn out to be very interesting because Miami does not, play very well in the cold. It sucks that this game couldn't be a Sunday night game. It would have been nice to have Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth calling this game, but it is what it is. It's a product of, a team being terrible and they get flexed out of back-to-back games. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye.